Welcome back. As I noted in the last video, we're taking a break from our videos on the Apostolic Fathers. There's one more of those to go. But I wanted to insert a couple of quick videos here on the early Christian heresies. That is, the heresies that these early church fathers and some of the apologists that are coming up in the next set of PowerPoints really had to contend with. Last time we dealt with the problem of, or the heresy of Ebionism, and in this particular video we're going to be looking at what actually was the most problematic heresy that the early church had to deal with, and that is the heresy of Gnosticism. And so we'll be looking at Gnosticism here. This video is going to be a bit longer than the one on Ebionism, because again, this was a very problematic heresy, and it really had a number of other aspects to it and led into, frankly, a couple of the other heresies and problems that we're going to be looking at later. So what we learn here about Gnosticism will be helpful for understanding a number of the heretical movements and different errors that the early church had to deal with. So let's get into it. Gnosticism. We saw that Ebionism really came from the Jewish heritage. Now, Gnosticism was something that was born from Greek philosophy. So what is it? What is Gnosticism? Many commentators will tell you that the subject of ancient Gnosticism is bewildering. The literature of Gnosticism is, to put it mildly, vast. There's a lot that's been discovered. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And the influence of ancient Gnosticism is nearly incalculable. It's indiscernible, as they say. It's complicated. Actually, until the 20th century, 1945 to be exact, all we really knew about Gnosticism, as we said with Ebionism, was what the opponents of this particular heresy taught. That is, what the church fathers taught against it. But in 1945, at a place called Nag Hammadi in Egypt, about a dozen or so scrolls of books were discovered, some that the archaeologists who found them called Gospels, stories about Jesus, were discovered, written by so-called Gnostic Christians. The library of texts was not finally translated until 1970, and this cache of texts, these books that they discovered, ignited a whole new field of studies that hadn't been there before. And this even led to some popular Gnostic ideas that spawned the New Age movement, which is something that's a little passé these days, and was even the basis of the nonsense of the Da Vinci Code, if you remember that. Among the so-called Gospels was one in particular called the Gospel of Thomas. Many scholars, were excited about this, not conservative scholars by any means, not Bible-believing scholars, but nevertheless, they were excited because it offered a fifth view, a fifth gospel, if you will, of the story of Jesus. So if you take Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as the four canonical gospels, you could add the Gospel of Thomas, so-called, and you'd have five Gospels. In fact, there was a book entitled The Five Gospels. And years ago, there was something called the Jesus Seminar, and you can Google that. It was widely hyped at the time, but a lot of what they said and thought was pretty much demonstrated to be nonsense. Fortunately, for our purposes, we really need to know only that the fathers who opposed this Gnostic teaching and these Gnostic teachers, we just need to know about them. We're mostly interested in the debates with the heretics that contributed to the formulation of the creeds and really were the foundation of the doctrine that came out of the early church. And as we'll see, one of my professors who wrote a book entitled Heresies, Harold O.J. Brown, actually said that a lot of what we teach in terms of orthodoxy was formulated because we had to respond to these heretics. The early church had to respond to them and explain why these ideas were heretical, not biblical, And so that was really kind of why theology got started in the first place. So when did all this happen? Gnosticism, as we will know, it had roots in a wider centuries-old Greek philosophically mostly Platonic worldview. So the worldview of the Gnostics was around. So there's some debate about whether we should even talk about Gnosticism as a Christian heresy. Certainly there was a Christian heresy of Gnosticism, but these ideas had been around for a long time. Plato, that's the image that you see there now, is actually the one that is the originator of this particular worldview, this Greek philosophical worldview. And again, we'll have more opportunity to look at him later, but this is where it all comes from. So the Gnostics were concerned with, in particular, are the ones who were active during the 2nd century, the 100s AD, and they are the ones that, again, were espousing a particular Christian version of this Platonic philosophical worldview. One of the first proponents of Gnosticism was a fellow referred to as Simon Magus. Now, there was a Simon Magus in the Gospel, or in the book of Acts, in chapter 8. And some of the church fathers suggest that this was the same guy, but that's a sort of iffy connection there. This biblical character was noted in the book of Acts very briefly, and probably the individual that is referred to as an early Gnostic by the same name was not actually the same individual. More significantly, one of the early Gnostics was a fellow named Marcion. Now, there's even a question about whether we should consider Marcion a Gnostic, but that's the kind of a question that really only scholars get interested in. It's best to think of Marcion as a Gnostic because of some of the ideas that he proposed, which again had the same background of sort of Greek philosophical or Platonic worldview. So even if he didn't espouse a fully Gnostic theology, the kinds of things that make him of interest to us were really from the same source. Marcion was from what's now modern-day Turkey, just south of the Black Sea. And the story is told that Marcion went to the great bishop and later martyr Polycarp, who we've already seen, and asked for his recognition. That is, he wanted Polycarp's approval. Irenaeus, who we've already seen may have had some contact with directly with Polycarp, reportedly said, "I recognize you, you are the firstborn of Satan." So that's not a very good endorsement, and some of Marcion's ideas were really wrong. By the way, as the note there says, I Googled Marcion, and this is the image that came up, so I won't vouch for it. That's just what Google tells me. Marcion is best known for his rejection of the New Testament, or rather the Old Testament, and much of the New Testament. Marcion only accepted Luke's gospel. The other gospels were too Jewish for him. All of the Old Testament references have been deleted, even in Luke's gospel, and Marcion rejected 10 of Paul's letters, again, because he saw them as less than really acceptable to a Gnostic point of view. We're going to see that the Gnostics didn't have a very high view of the God of the Old Testament because he's the God that created everything, and they also saw him as a rather vengeful God, but they saw Jesus as the one who came in order to show us God's love and care. Again, because like many Platonists who thought that the created physical world was a mistake and evil, and that's a key part of the Platonic or a Greek philosophical worldview. The spirit realm is where it's at. That's the true realm. That's the realm that we all want to sort of try and get back to, and somehow in the physical realm that we're stuck in is not a good place. And so because of that, their view of Christ was docetic or docetic. There are those that suggest that Marcion may have repented of his heresies later in life, but we don't really know, and frankly, that's not much of an interest to us now. So another early Gnostic heretic was an individual named Valentinus. Valentinus was from Alexandria. You can see his dates there, so he's a little bit later than many of the church fathers that we've been looking at. He was an Egyptian, educated again, as it says there, in Alexandria. His background is Greek philosophical, because that's what the Greek philosophical worldview was most prevalent in Alexandria at the time. Like many, he traveled to Rome in order to try and increase the number of his adherents, but his heresy was very strongly opposed, and he was forced to go to Cyprus, eventually where he died. His system is really complicated, but here's a very simplified version of it. You can see there that there's the Father, there's the Son, and then there's, well, just other names. The Spirit, of course, is what's missing there. You can see down at the bottom, separated from the world of the Father and the Son and Sophia, wisdom, is the world of the material world. And again, that's demonstrating again that there's really this higher realm, the spiritual realm, the realm where the Father is, as well as the Son, and then there's the physical realm. This system is dualistic, and you should think in terms of the higher realm of the spirit and the lower realm of the material, and even in some sense pantheistic. Well, the objective of the Gnostic was to get out of the physical world and rise up. That's what the oval is in that picture, to rise up toward the realm of the Father and the Son. And you do that by wisdom, by having the wisdom that is the Sophia, that's the term for wisdom. And as you gain that wisdom, you're enabled better to understand and proceed to the higher realm. Let me quickly give you some terms here that describe this Gnosticism. The first is gnosis. That's where the Gnostic comes from. It just means knowledge. So Gnosticism taught that you needed, in order to rise up in that realm, from the material realm to the spirit realm, you needed knowledge, and it kind of a secret knowledge that they taught. Again, this may be the kind of teaching that is reflected in what Paul was teaching the Corinthians about philosophy and why they needed to avoid it. Pleroma, or the word fullness, again, was the realm, the upper realms of reality, the spiritual realms of reality. Paul talks about Christ being the fullness in the book of Colossians. He talks about that he is the fullness of God, in contrast to these false Gnostic ideas. Another term that you need to know is the term demiurge. Now, the demiurge is not quite a person, but not God. The demiurge in Plato's writings, simply put, was the one who created the physical world. So he's the one that's responsible for creating this physical world. And again, the physical material world for these Platonists, for this worldview, is a mistake. So the demiurge was either a bungler or evil or both. But for them, the demiurge, the God who did the creating of this physical world, is not good. Again, you can see why they reject the Old Testament, particularly Genesis, because they think this physical world was a mistake. So another couple of terms before we go on. Cosmos is the word for world. It has the idea of order, In Gnosticism, this was the lower realm, the physical world again. And this realm, this cosmos, is anything but ordered as far as they're concerned. The physical realm is either meaningless or actually evil. And again, the idea is to try and get out of it. And again, how do you get out of it? Let me go back. Don't normally do this. You need the gnosis there, the knowledge, in order that you might move on to out of the cosmos into this upper realm. The eons. This term has a number of different Greek connotations to it. It might mean age or realm. We speak of the age of reason or the Enlightenment or the medieval age. In Gnosticism, look at the last sentence there. In Gnosticism, the eons were divine beings that emanated and emerged from the upper realm. So how does anyone have contact between that upper realm of the spirit, that upper realm of God? Well, it's because the eons, these divine beings, they emanate. They're the ones that make the contact between the two realms possible. So how do we put all this together? What all of this means is that Gnosticism, again, had a very different and weird worldview, cosmology. Their view of the universe and creation is very different than that of the Bible. And while Marcion didn't use a lot of these terms, again, we said earlier, he might not actually have been a full-blown Gnostic because he didn't use these terms. He did, along with the Gnostics, believe that creation was a mistake. The physical world is bad, and the best thing you can do is get out of it. And he believed that Christ came to give us the way out. And the way out, the gnosis, the knowledge that we need, is the knowledge of love and selflessness, and that's the teaching that Jesus gave us. So all of this meant two things for Marcion. Jesus cannot be the creator of the physical world, and Jesus cannot be physical. The world is all bad. So the physical world is all bad. So his view of Jesus was that the incarnation didn't really happen. The virgin birth, that's not how he made his way into the world. Jesus just kind of shows up and starts teaching in Capernaum, and then the resurrection. This is why Marcion denied or took out certain parts of even the Gospel of Luke, everything that talked about the birth of Christ. For him, the whole point was that Jesus wasn't even really there. He only seemed to be a man. Now remember, in the era of Ebionism, that's all he was a man. In the heresy of Gnosticism, he only seemed to be a man. Now this comes from the Greek word dokeo, which means to think or to seem. So in Docetism is the way you pronounce that heresy. It's a sub-heresy of Gnosticism, and Docetism is an aspect of a number of other heresies that we will touch on later on, that he only seemed to be a man. That is, for them, it was much easier for them to believe that he was a divine being, one of those eons who came in order to show us how we could, through gnosis, the knowledge of love and selflessness and self-giving, what he showed us when he died on the cross, all of that was a show to show us what we needed to do in order that we may rise back up to the realm of the Spirit. So again, I've already said Docetism is in various forms found in other heresies as well. All right, so what does it have to do with the real Jesus? Well, we know that John calls him the Word, the Logos, and one has to have Jesus in your understanding in order to claim to be a Christian at all. So again, the Gnostics claimed that he came to reveal the gnosis in the system itself and the way to get back to the good or back to the fullness or back to that spirit realm. But from their point of view, he could not have been actually a part of the physical realm. Otherwise, he would have been contaminated. He would have been trapped here, as we are. Those who are blessed with the gnosis, those who are blessed with the gnosis can rise, and those that don't have it are stuck. Once again, the Gnostics claimed that Jesus only appeared to be a man. And we may note with Dr. Brown, whom I referred to earlier, why is this tendency so common in early Christianity? And the simple reason, he says, is that the claims of the New Testament makes for Jesus and the impression that he made on his followers was so overwhelming, it was not difficult to conceive us. It was difficult not to conceive him as ever really having been a man. It was so overwhelming that it was difficult to not to conceive him as ever really having been a man. The early Christians found it easier to accept Christ as God than to admit that God, being God, he was also a truly man. In other words, when they applied their reason to this idea, or to what the New Testament taught about Jesus, they said, we really don't see how it's possible for him to be both God and man. But as we've seen, and will continue to see, the Orthodox Apostolic Fathers certainly did see that that's exactly what the New Testament taught. Well, thanks again for your attention to this. We will return to the next video to the Apostolic Fathers.